I guess I started really being an artist about 25 years ago, and there have been a few highlights. I guess the first real highlight was doing a show that Russell gave me at Leo Cohen's house. That was like maybe 25 years ago over on Avenue A. And I think I sold like two paintings at that show, and that was dope. And a lot of people came and blah. So that might have been. I had shows before that, but that was really my first introduction to shows of people who were in the art world. I mean, outside of the people that I knew. And a lot of people came, and I got a lot of good compliments. So and a few important people bought some work. But there have been other highlights. One was when I started my gallery in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Uh, I guess about the same year, I started a gallery in my brownstone. I had a brownstone over on Macon Street, and I started the Sanctuary Gallery. So that was really my first art gallery, and that was a lot of fun to do because I invited the community, and it was the beginning of my really inviting the community in and being a part of an arts movement or helping to create a black arts movement in New York City. From there, the next highlight probably was my taking that gallery. I closed it because I moved into a loft out in Williamsburg. It wasn't hip Williamsburg yet, but it was big lofts over there, and I had a 5,000 square foot loft. But I started a gallery with this other brother named Manu in Tribeca called Annexed. And we had a show that lasted a month. I mean, the show lasted a month, but every week we did something new. One week it was poetry, and that really started my involvement in the poetry movement. And one week it was fashion, and that was the beginning of Fat Farm. So we had Fat Farm, and we had a number of FUBU and a number of those other things. And then we had some black film. And so I met a bunch of young filmmakers. And so every week we had lines and celebrities around the gallery in Tribeca. I mean, Tyson Beckford was there, Naomi Campbell, and all the people that were banging in the early 90s. I think this was 94. And it was just amazing, amazing thing. And it showed me that art really could bring people together. After that gallery closed, the next big thing in my life was I started Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation and opened Rush Gallery in Chelsea. And that must have been about 96. And we had our first big fundraiser that Run DMC and Eartha Kitt performed at. And we did it at the Puck Building. And so Russell and I raised $250,000 and opened a gallery in Chelsea. And then we moved, gave the rest of the money to arts organizations that work with kids. And so that started really the organization of Rush Philanthropic, which is still here today, and it's a $3 million organization. The year later, I bought a building in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn, and started Corridor Gallery. And so now we had two art galleries. And building was 3 lofts. I lived in one, rented out 2, and created an art gallery in the corridor that led to the apartments. And so that was the beginning of stuff, and I've just been building on that. But along the way, in order to build those galleries, I got more involved in different things like poetry. And so in order to bring people into the art gallery, I would do poetry during a show. And I'd have a poetry, and I didn't do slams, but poetry, people just doing their poetry. And that really led to me meeting Bruce George. And Bruce George was hungry, and Bruce kept on saying, let's take poetry to the next level, let's take poetry to the next level. And so I came up with the concept of deaf poetry, building on deaf comedy. Deaf comedy had ended maybe a year or 2 before, and I figured the easiest way to do that was to dovetail off an existing brand. And so we created deaf poetry, and everybody knows the whole deaf poetry story. It went on and won a Peabody Award for the TV show and a Tony Award and Stan Lathan and them turned it into a Broadway show, and it won the Tony Award for the Broadway show. And so it had a long and good run, and it's still resonating today. And nowadays, every once in a while, I do a deaf poetry reunion, and bring back different poets that were on the show or in the on Broadway and bring them together and put on a show, because people are still clamoring for deaf poetry. Along the way, I've had museum shows. I've shown around the world. I've shown in Ghana. I've shown in France. I've shown my artwork in Amsterdam. And so, I've just been having a career in the arts. I had 5 solo shows last year all over the country. And I have a solo show next month at NYU, which will be June 2013. Then in September, I'm having a solo show at Skylight Gallery back here in Brooklyn. And so I'm painting a lot and doing what I do, running the foundation and writing poetry and creating poetry and just having a good life, man. I don't get up at 9 to 5, although some mornings I get up at 9, depending on what I got to do. But, to be able to control your own destiny and do what you want to do, and I've built this out of the need to do something, and your imagination feels good. I don't know how good it's going to be 10 years from now when I ain't got no pension and whatnot, but in the meantime, I've been collecting art, and hopefully you'll get to see some of the art, because I'm sure you'll shoot some B-roll of all the art. I collect African art, I collect comic books, I collect contemporary art, and I'm having fun, man. No, I went to school. I'm not a self-taught artist. I am a self-taught artist, and I'm not a self-taught artist. My mother was an amateur artist, and she taught me how to paint when I was a kid. So I'm a mother-helped artist, but I didn't go to school for it. I went to school for social work. I wanted to help people even then, and so the vehicle for that was, I didn't see being an arts advocate. Nobody says, oh, I'm going to grow up and be an arts advocate. I wanted a job, and I wanted a job helping people, so I decided to be a social worker. And I did that for about 8 years until I started really getting into the art field. Work on paper, work on canvas is pretty much the same thing. Canvas, of course, can grow to be a lot larger than paper. I do 5-foot, 6 by 6 foot paintings, and even longer than that. I did a 40-foot painting once on canvas. Works on paper typically, the typical size piece of paper people paint on is 22 by 30 inches. The primary difference with paper and canvas to me is I feel more guarded a little bit when I'm painting on canvas. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's the surface, maybe it's the fact that it costs more. I feel like my works on paper come freer to me and easier than the works on canvas, that I work a little harder, not better. Sometimes I think the paper is sometimes even better, but it's more of a flow of imagination when I'm doing the paperwork. I just get into it and get it. And when I'm painting on canvas, I sit down, I think about it, what's the next brush stroke, this, that, the other. When I'm doing the paper, it just comes to me. My work really is about spiritual connections and connecting with spirit beyond what you see or hear about in the churches. It's the universal spirit, it's the spirit of other people. I never really take it in consideration the environment that people will put it in. I don't paint it for living rooms or anybody's decoration or to put it anywhere. If people find that it fits somewhere, that's cool. But I really paint a lot for me to, it's sort of like a spiritual experience painting. And so I've never really considered, like, oh, this is going to be in somebody's living room or bedroom. Between religion and spirituality. And so, what I think happens is people connect spiritually with the work, and people engage in conversations around it and connect to each other around the work. I don't see it ended up in religious institutions, although I know religious people have purchased it, but not in the religious institutions. They're not like any bit of icons that most religions could point to saying, this is something my religion represents, because they're abstractions. But I think people find spiritual force in the work. Yeah, I mean, there's not much of a big difference to me in creating art and creating literature. And I think poetry is verbal painting for me, layering and putting things together and coming up with a uniform thought or idea or feeling. And so I think that it makes sense sometimes to couple poetry with the artwork, especially if you're the artist doing it, because then people can read something and see the similarity. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the painting was made for that poem, but you can sort of feel the same spirit coming off the painting as you can through the words and the poetry. A number of poets, let's put it that way, and both vice versa, have looked at my work and asked, could they use my work for the cover of their books? Could they use their work in the interior of their books? Sonia Sanchez and I, a very famous poet, she used a number of my paintings in a book about haikus that she did. So yeah, people find my work matches their words and my words matches their painting. The graphic novel 85 is a takeoff on the book 3 Days as the Crow Flies. And basically, it's part of a trajectory of moving that novel to being a movie. And so, plus I'm a comic book fan, so I always wanted my own comic book. And I thought the story was 3 Days as the Crow Flies, the story was a very, very visual comic. So I got a good friend of mine, comic book artist and illustrator Floyd Hughes, and we sat down and I pitched the story back to the publishers, Simon & Schuster, who published the first novel. Could they consider publishing a graphic novel? And they thought it was a great idea, so they gave us a budget and we went ahead and put it together. That's out. That a friend of mine and a great writer did. And Trey, his name is Trace Mia. Trace and I both see the movie having animation aspects to it. Like there's a party scene I see being animated, and there's some drug scenes with people on mushrooms that I see being, animated or sort of overlaid like Sin City or something like that. And there's some night scenes that should be like that. So, yeah, and some club scenes, and gallery scenes. Every day-to-day scenes I see is regular, movie, but there are places that animation will lend to, and so we have that in the budget that we're circulating with the script.
So it's safe to say it's in the works.
Well, it's being shopped, put it that way. When somebody bites, then it's in the works. When somebody sends us a check, we in the works.
Gotcha. And your current book, Deep in Your Best Reflection?
Deep in Your Best Reflection. That was a book created out of poems that I was texting my girlfriend at the time. And they're very sexy, personal poems that I was texting her. I was laid up in the hospital and missing her, and I'd text these little sexy poems to her, and she'd write back. And it continued on, and then when I thought of it becoming an actual book, months later, because I had stopped with her, I picked up a couple of friends of mine and asked them would they receive some texts and read them and respond to them, not the poem, but what they thought of them, blah, blah, blah. And so I maybe did about 50 poems in that. There was about 100 poems out of texts created. And maybe 50 of them went to my girlfriend, and maybe 50 of them went to different female friends who then gave me criticism and feedback on the poems. And then finally, I edited it down to 25, 30 poems, and we found some photographs, and we created a book, and I self-published that one. And I think it came out great, and it's selling pretty well, and you can get it on my website, DannySimmonsArtist.com. That's a little plug there. And, but a number of people have bought it, and they read it with their girlfriends, or the girlfriends read it with them. And some really hot poems in there. And they're short because most of them are the length of one text page, which at that point my phone only was 160 word characters. So once you read 160 word characters, it would convert to multimedia or the next page. So I tried to keep it within one page. So it was a great exercise because you're trying to say what you got to say, but you got to say it in such a short period of time, and you want it to be effective. So it was a great intellectual exercise doing that book.
It's a visually attractive book. Who did the photography in the book?
Oh, that was source photography that we overlaid with blue and tones. We just found them online and not attributed to they weren't anybody's particular artwork. They were just like pictures of naked girls, that sort of thing. And so, we found them and like, oh, this looks like it'll match here and there. My gallery is targeted to young emerging artists. And so a lot of my following are people under 35, under 40, who's a younger demographic. I don't know if my demographic is in the 20s, although I just went to a party, art party the other night and walked in and I was sort of like the grandfather art celebrity at the shit. And everybody was 25. So he said, Danny Simmons is here. I was like, yeah, where the fuck is he? It was funny. But it seems that the brand Rush and what we do over at Rush has a great deal of importance for this new generation of artists just coming out of school also.
And just going back to the material in that book, what was the response reaction from your girlfriend?
Oh, she loved it. She still reads it. She's probably reading it with her new boyfriend.
Okay.
See what this brother wrote? See what he wrote me? See what he wrote me? You need to be more like Daddy. Art for Life out in the Hamptons. We usually raise around $2 million at that thing, which is the biggest part of our budget. Foundation is strong, it's stable. We've just gotten a couple new really high-powered. One of the great things about this foundation is we got Russell on it, and we're co-chair this foundation. And Russell has a lot of rich and powerful friends, so that's really helped to make the foundation grow. So I give praise for my little brother every day being involved in this, And so, we both work very, very hard to make sure that we got a great executive director, Tangi. The thing that happened that just threw a little wrinkle in it, but we've bounced back really well, is Russell moved to California because he went out there to make movies and do some stuff and his daughters are out there. And so when he moved, he said, "Oh, the hell with it, I sold his Hamptons house." And so, in the beginning, after he did that, we were in a little scramble to find a new place to have that fundraiser. But we found this really great farm that's not far from the ocean, and it's huge, and we got it for a week, and we're gonna have a really great party. We got some great honorees and great art, and we're gonna have some great entertainment. So I think it's gonna go on just as well as it did before, but it makes me a little nervous because we did it 13 years at Russell's house and people are expecting to go to Russell's house. So when they find out it's someplace different, either it'll be one or two things. They're like, or you can be like, oh great, I'm so tired of going to Russell's house, I didn't know what to do. So I'm glad they found someplace new. So we'll see how they come off, but I'm sure either way, mostly it's more about who we reach out to, who the honorees are, and the entertainment, and the actual location, I'm hoping. I have a theater company that I started with writer Nelson George, the Brooklyn International Theater Company, and we've done 2 performances, one at Brooklyn Museum and one at BAM. And I just put on a play, I hosted or put together a play called Brownsville Bread for this organization that feed the elderly that are in public housing in Brownsville. And I brought back the play with the charity, and then I'm on the board of Long Island University, and they got a great theater called the Cumble Theater, and I got them to donate the theater. So we just raised about 10 grand for them, putting their play on, and that was last week. So, I mean, I love theater. I'm producing a little bit of it with Nelson, but it's not my thing as much as visual arts or written art like poetry. But I think all forms of art are really important to everyone. I think you need to branch out. You need to see plays. You need to go see some dance. You need to do. I mean, all of it enriches your life, and I think that I promote and help people with all of it. But my personal love is writing and painting. There's some vibrant art movements going on worldwide. I mean, it used to be New York and Paris, like you said, from New York to Paris. But now there's a big art movement in South Africa, and there's a big art movement in China, and there's always been great art in different parts of Europe, Italy, Amsterdam. I just came back from Barbados. We had the third, and I'm involved in now next year be producing the Caribbean Art Fair. So there's gonna be a big art thing again there next year. So there's art everywhere. You just have to look for it. You can, Miami has an art scene. you know, especially during Art Basel, more art than you probably want to ever see. You go down to Miami during Art Basel, I mean, there's more art than you could possibly see, even if you went to art all day long. So, I mean, if you're interested in art, go to Miami. I mean, if you don't want to travel internationally, you know, but you want to see international galleries, and there's all the galleries from around the world, go to Miami Art Basel. And it's a good way to start seeing art from around the world without having to leave the United States. I mean, but there are the art fairs here too. There's Frieze, there's Scope, there's a bunch of New York art fairs that feature international arts and artists. And so, you know, you might see something there and become interested in the art of a country and then travel on to there. I certainly recommend going places, and because just the traveling itself broadens your perspective, and you go to see the art, but you might fall in love with the culture and the country and other things about that. So I think people need to get out of their hoods. Come back to them, but get out of them for a minute.